Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Rugby Magazine Fantasy Show. In this one, I thought I'd do something a little bit different. I asked you all to send in all of your questions with regards to the fantasy, the Rugby Mag, anything, and you've sent them all in. There's a lot of crossover, so fortunately I'm able to cover off a lot of answers. But anyway, thank you for sending all of those in, and these are the ones that I've picked to run back to you today. So, Danny Granary has asked, is the transfer deadline now before each individual game? Great question. So, as I said in a previous video, I'll highlight it up here so you can run through in more detail, but it's the fixtures that close off the game week for the players that are playing in those players whose clubs are playing in those fixtures. So when the first fixture kicks off, I think it's Harlequins Exeter, any Harlequins and Exeter players will be locked into your team and your squad. You will not be able to transfer them out of your squad or remove them from your team, and you won't be able to change them in your team selection. They'll be locked in. And it's the same as the fixtures progress through. The players will get systematically locked in as those fixtures progress. It's the fixtures that provide the locks this season, same as it was last season, but obviously just to clarify and make sure you know. So the next question is from Dylan Kirk. What happens if one of your starting players doesn't play? Another good question. So we have automatic substitutions built into our game. We set it up so that if a player doesn't play that you've selected in your starting lineup, a player from your bench will come in and replace them. It's better to get full points than to get half points, obviously, but note that the position that has been vacated by the player who isn't playing, you need to have a player who plays in that position on your bench. So if you don't, then you won't get that substitution. You are welcome to select two scrum halves, for example, but if it's a fly half that drops out and you haven't got a fly half who can stand in, then you won't get that automatic substitution. Two scrum halves on the bench, I mean there, just to clarify. So, next question. Pro Fly Half Swift Bird has asked, how many transfers are there per round? Now, normally there is one transfer per round, one free transfer per round. There's up to 5 transfers per round. There's normally one free transfer per round. Because of COVID, we've shifted that up to 2. We expect there to be obviously a lot of turnover in the teams as we move through the season. Perhaps less so than we've had over the last couple of weeks. I think we're back to weekly games now rather than 2 games a week. So, but we've left it at 2 just to give everybody the flexibility to be able to make it through the season. Now, as I said, there are 5 transfers. We don't really have transfers in our game. We have signing and releases. They're 2 very separate things. So you have your wider squad and you can transfer players in. You can transfer as many players in as you like, dependent on the budget that you have. But you're only, once the game week starts, the first game week starts and you're first entered for points, you're only allowed to release 5 players in that game week. And so for this season, 2 of those are free. The remaining 3, you incur a 20-point penalty for each of those extra transfers that you make. So if you make all 5 transfers, you get a 60-point transfer penalty. If you make just 2 transfers out of those 5, those 2 are free and you won't get a penalty. So hopefully that clarifies that one. Swifty86 says, which player offers the best value for money? Fair question, actually, really good. So as part of the silver upgrade, actually, we have a value option on the app and on the website that will list the players by value for points against value, you know, how much money you're spending against how much reward you're going to get out for it. But actually, just to answer the question, at the top of that list at the moment is Bristol's Chris Vui, who was obviously absolutely fantastic last season and doesn't cost the earth. So he's a really great recommendation for your team. Paul has asked, can players playing in international fixtures earn points for your team? So the very short answer to that question is no. The way the game is set up, it's a Premiership fantasy game. So players who play in the Premiership, in the fixtures in the Premiership, earn points. If a player isn't playing in the Premiership, then they don't earn points. Even if they're playing for England on the same day, it doesn't matter. You only earn points for players playing in the Premiership. We do run a Six Nations competition, of course, so players who are playing in the Six Nations, playing for England in the Six Nations, their nation in the Six Nations, they will earn points in that Six Nations competition, and then those playing in the Premiership will earn points in the Premiership competition. So hopefully that answers that one. Duncan Keane has asked, is there a maximum amount a player value can change in a game week? Yeah, that's a nice pertinent question, actually. So I'm not going to go into great detail about how the algorithm works. There's obviously an absolute ton going behind the scenes, but there is a general rule of thumb with the way this goes through. Player values don't immediately rise to their highest level. They gradually increase over the first 8 rounds. Obviously, we have a lot of people come and join the game, and we don't want to ostracize them by the fact that players' values have already jumped sky high because of the selection counts. They generally increase through the first 7-8 rounds to their max. From there, the player values are based on how many people have selected those players, how popular they are. The more popular they are, the more they're going to cost, but also how well they're playing in a given game week. Now, each of those can kind of fluctuate their value anywhere between 50 to 100k, I think 120k I think is probably the maximum it will go up, and they can obviously move up and down within those values. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but they'll never go below the value that they started with at the beginning of the season right now. They'll never drop below that, so you're never going to lose money on players, unless of course you sign them when they're very, very expensive halfway through the season, get injured, everybody drops them, you pick up the news late, and then you release them and their value has plummeted down, and you obviously lose the cash on that. So it's important to stay on top of that and make sure you're following the news and the players and how they're getting on, and just monitoring their values. One other question that I've thought of covering off that actually might be quite pertinent as we head into tomorrow night. Somebody like Alex Dombrand, you can select him at lock or number 8 on our game. So what happens if, for example, you select him at lock and he is playing at number 8 for his team tomorrow night? The way our point structure is set up, and it's outlined on the help page, so you can see the breakdown. I've done a video of it as well. Again, I'll pop that in a link up here. The way our points is broken down is applied to where the player plays in a given game week for his club, for his team. So Alex Dombrand, if he's playing number 8 tomorrow night, the point structure that we have in our game is applied to him as a number 8 where he's playing tomorrow night. So if you select him as a lock in your team, you don't get lock's points for his game. It's really important that everybody has the opportunity to have the same amount of points from the same player in a given game week. So our points are applied to the position that the player plays for their team and not the position that you select them in your team. So it gives you the flexibility to be able to include high scoring players in different positions if you're able to see that and recognise that, but it is for the player's team, the position for the player's team where those points are applied. James Pruitt has asked, can I use property investments to lower my salary? I mean, if you can afford property investments, you can probably afford to buy the Rugby magazine, and if you wanted to do that and be in charge, then yeah, absolutely, you can make the rules. But until then, unfortunately, no, my rules apply, and you can't do that. So apologies on that front. Charlie Patrick has asked, if I don't label someone as my kicker and they take a conversion or a penalty, will I still get points for that? So again, the short answer to that one is no. It's only the player that you've chosen as your kicker that will get the points for kicks at goal, not drop kicks, just conversions and penalties. So if, for example, you had George Ford on your team and who's another good example, Danny Cipriani. If you had both of those on your team, Danny Cipriani obviously plays fullback, you had him in there, and you had George Ford. You selected George Ford as your kicker, and he pings over loads of penalties and conversions, you will get those points. Danny Cipriani, doesn't matter how many he kicks, if he isn't your kicker, you don't get those points. But watch out for that, because it might mean that at the end of a game week, for example, Danny Cipriani might end up with 20 points, of which 5 were kicked points, but if he's not your kicker, you don't get those 5. So actually, you only earn 15 points from Danny Cipriani's performance and not his full 20, because you haven't selected him as your designated kicker. So hopefully that one that covers that one off. HJ Bish has asked, can you hire me? I mean, I want the Rugby magazine to be a fantastic company that obviously offers so much good to the world and rugby and is awesome, and I'd love to hire everybody. I'd love to take you all on this journey with me, and perhaps one day I will, but at the moment obviously we're still pretty small, but one step after the next. Ask me again in 3 years and hopefully we'll be in a better position to be able to talk about that. Our good friends over at Fab Rugby have asked, can I start with 10,000 points please? I mean, we'd all love to start with 10,000 points. Perhaps I start everybody with 10,000 points and then you can start with 10,000 points. I think if somebody can start Bath with 10,000 points in the Premiership, when that happens, then yes, Fab Rugby, you can start with 10,000 points in the Fantasy. How does that sound? Let me know. So a quick one from me as well. What if you start the game late? What if you miss the first round of fixtures, or what happens if you start halfway through the fixtures? So of course there is the potential that you signed up on a Saturday morning after the Friday games have finished, this coming Saturday before the Friday games have finished. We've set it up so that you can still choose this team and you can still be entered for the first round. It does make it a little bit harder in that you can't choose those players that have played on a Friday night. Probably the best thing for you, if you can pick a squad of 28 and you can put out a team, go for it, absolutely go for it, and then pick up back through the season. Otherwise, wait until week 2. You know, one of the guys who won a few years back didn't start until week 2 and just absolutely blitzed it and made it through. In fact, there's a guy who didn't start until week 4, the season before last. He ended up winning the cup. So there is always something to play for. And this season, of course, having teamed up with Restart Rugby and donating to Restart Rugby, we're organising some fantastic prizes from players' businesses through the season as well. So there are monthly prizes to play for. So even if you sign up in January, February, you can still play for February, March, April, May, June's prizes through the last back end of the season. So there is something to play for right the way through. So there's absolutely no reason not to get involved if you start late. And of course, if you start late, you know, if you start in January and all of your mates start in January as well, then you're all starting from square one and you still get the bragging rights in any custom leagues that you set up. So there we go. I hope those answers give you a little bit more clarity as we head into the new Gallagher Premiership season. Thank you as ever for watching. I hope you enjoy these videos. I really enjoy making them. Please reach out if I can answer any other questions about the fantasy, the rugby or anything else. Otherwise, jump onto the website, choose your team, and let's get supporting Restart Rugby this year and raise as much money as we can for them. As ever, hit that like and subscribe button. Obviously, it does us a massive favour and gets us in front of people, helps us grow the game. Follow us on your favourite social media channel, and I look forward to the next video, which is most likely going to be a preview of the first game week of the Gallagher Premiership season.